Many of you may have heard of something called the milk tea movement. Essentially, it's a coalition of Netzians, people who are online citizens. Now, they're from a collection of countries: Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, and Myanmar, Burma. And in these countries, these so-called Netzians are all about being anti-authoritarian. Now, of course, what they mean by anti-authoritarian is essentially anti-China. That's basically their modus operandi. And they have demonstrated on many, many occasions that they are simply repeating many of the talking points given by U.S. foreign policy, particularly towards imperialism. Now, the hashtag #MilkTeaAlliance originally began back in April 2020, and it had nothing to do with politics whatsoever. However, over time, it became co-opted because these foods are particular symbols of many Southeast Asian countries. And it's interesting to note that many of these drinks that are being used as symbols are particularly ones that are enjoyed by the petty bourgeois, mostly liberal types, meaning basically middle class. And in many countries like Thailand, Burma, Myanmar, and many of the other countries involved in this, you essentially have to be middle class to even have access to the internet to begin with. And they choose a very middle class style, trendy food as, or in this case a drink, as a symbol of that movement. And that's also very telling when you combine it with other known information about the movement. When we look at the substance of what it is that they're saying, it matches perfectly the color revolution style rhetoric that's been used in the past. This time it's been a more online thing rather than a quasi underground kind of thing that was used in the past. Remember the Jasmine Revolution, the various other color revolutions that were used to undermine countries in favor of U.S. foreign policy. And as you can imagine, every time that happens through organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy and Radio Free Asia, all of which are funded by the U.S. government and directed by the CIA, have caused absolute chaos everywhere they have gone. They have caused a political turmoil where there usually wasn't one, but there was one building, and they threw fuel on the fire that turned them into outright disasters. Because this was all about undermining the domestic independence politics in favor of something that would be sympathetic towards U.S. interests, particularly in terms of making a profit. I also think it's kind of funny that they happen to use the tea, which was something that the British Empire, something that these movements also tend to glorify. They tend to glorify the past, particularly with regards to British imperialism as well. And then tea was something that the British Empire profited massively off of, and also opium during that same time. And that, you know, these are the kinds of symbols that they want to use in order to invoke their own society and some kind of desire for social change. And as this goes on, we begin to see more when you look into what it is their ideology, what it is that they're saying, what it is that they believe. You see this always phrased opposition. It's always... They tend to bash China a lot. They say things like, it's China versus democracy, as if somehow the United States was a bastion of democracy around the world. The country which has invaded innumerable countries throughout the last several hundred years, overthrow democratically elected governments in favor of dictators that just essentially serve the profits of large companies in the United States, hence where we actually get the term banana republic from. But you see that it's always phrased that way. Something else versus democracy. In other words, they're not even really talking in terms of interest. They're talking in terms of anybody who disagrees with what is a pro-US and in many cases pro-UK stance, as with we see in Hong Kong. It is therefore some kind of ultimate evil, this kind of straight up black and white thinking, you're either with us or against us kind of colonialist mentality, imperialist mentality, speaks volumes as to what much of these organizations is about. And we can tell this because their primary news source is Radio Free Asia, which basically is CIA propaganda. I mean, this is the same one that makes up ridiculous accusations against the DPRK with no evidence whatsoever and expects everyone to believe it. I mean, their whole job, they're funded by the U.S. government and almost verbatim give U.S. foreign policy talking points. You can literally guess what their articles and their news broadcasts are going to be according to U.S. foreign policy. Like, it's perfectly predictable. And that while it is a private company, it's funded by the United States. And their talking points are all straight from the White House, straight from U.S. foreign policy discussions. That much is very clear. Because they claim to care about Asians, and then this is about the rights of Asians. This is about Asian peoples. Yet, when the United States was going through its anti-Asian hysteria, in which innumerable Asian people were targeted for violence, repression, insults, degrading things, all kinds of manner of illegal and hateful conduct towards them, they were dead silent. They said nothing. Because they wouldn't want to criticize their paymasters in Washington. And that speaks volumes of this. What we're looking at is just simply another color revolution, another fake revolutionary movement being put out by the United States government for the purpose of geopolitical wrangling. Because the United States empire is collapsing. It knows it. You know it. Everyone around the world knows the U.S. empire is in decline. And that's the point here. As the U.S. empire continues to decline, it will resort to increasingly unethical means in order to prop itself up. And one day, maybe out of sheer necessity, they may resort to overt, public, obvious fascism. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.